Welcome everybody to our Chairs Roundtable. Uh, this is being recorded, so please push OK if you're okay with that. Please, if you have questions or comments during the course of this, put them right into the chat. If we have time, we will try and answer them at the end. So I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank our sponsors, Council Services Plus, which is an insurance company that was founded specifically to help nonprofits find cost-effective insurance. So check them out if you're looking for any. Board Strong is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to help improve the functioning of nonprofits by focusing on boards. We believe that strong boards translate into strong organizations, which then result in stronger programs for our participants. And of course, strong boards require strong leaders. And that's why we're here today with 4 board chairs to help to share their experiences with us. Started, let us introduce, we have Carm Bassel from the United Way of the Capital Region, Xavier Laplace, who's with Corning, Mary Kay with Oswego Historical, and Freddie Garcia with Family Services in the Hudson Valley. So why don't I open it up and let each of you tell us a little bit about the organization that you work with and how long you've been with them. Xavier, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm the board president for 171 Cedar Arts Center in Corning, New York. This is an organization that provides art education and also organizes exhibits of contemporary artists and live performance related to the arts. I've been part of the board for, it's been 6 years now, and president of the board for 4 years now.
That's great. Okay. Next, let's go with Carm Bassel. I should have mentioned before that in addition to being a former board chair, he is the CEO of the Capital District Transportation Authority. Carm?
Thanks, Barbara, and good morning. Actually, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think I have the dubious distinction of being a board chair and reporting to a board chair. Here I report to a board of directors that is appointed by the governor of New York State. So I get to see things sort of from both sides now. But in my work with the United Way, immediate past chair, I was chair until October of this year. That load was lifted off my shoulders. I served 3 terms because of COVID. They asked me to serve 2 terms to get through COVID and to not change the chair and have sort of a continuous operation. A typical United Way that supports the community with multiple programs, many of them aimed at children in need, education, and especially children who go without food. One of the greatest discoveries of my adult life was how many children in our region eat less than 2 meals, actually eat 1 meal a day in our region. And it was sort of the aha moment for me. I have to be involved and I have to help. So pleased to be with the panel today, and I'm sure we're going to have a great 45 minutes or hour conversation.
Thank you so much. Next, let's go to Freddie, who is the Equity and Inclusion Officer at Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here. So I had the pleasure of serving as the chair of Family Services in Poughkeepsie and Dutchess County for 2 years. And now I'm immediate chair to the board. And Family Services' mission is to bring people together to make sure that we can fulfill the needs of our communities in different ways. And so we do everything from not only youth services programs, community safety programs, we also focus on prevention, behavioral health, and we also run a kind of community building called the Family Partnership Center, about 65,000 square feet. We host kind of the one-stop shop kind of configuration with other community partners. We're about a little under 200 full-time employees and have a budget around $2 22 million. So we're mighty. We try to do the best we can in such an area that needs a lot of assistance and help. So happy to be here and share what I can about what we do at Family Services.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Mary Kay, who's a retired theater professional. She just laughed when you said the size of your budget and the number of employees you have, Freddie, because hers is an all-volunteer organization. So that's what makes her special on this panel today. Mary Kay, take it away.
Hi, I'm Mary Kay Stone with the Oswego County Historical Society, which owns and operates the Richardson Bates House Museum. And yeah, we are all volunteer except one part-time minimum wage assistant. Our budget is under $70,000 a year, and most of it is sucked up in maintaining this 150-year-old Italianate Tuscan villa mansion with 90% of the original contents, which is very precious to us, but it's also very difficult to maintain. So we have a board of 12, mostly older people. At 73, I'm one of the younger ones. That presents its own challenges, as I'll probably get to talk about a little later.
Yes, thank you. You'll not only get to talk to that, but when we were talking together amongst ourselves, we realized that every single one of these individuals is on a board that has an old building. So we'll probably be chatting about that a little bit as well. But why don't we start with sort of an open question? And just for the audience, I'm hoping that we'll make this more of a conversation than just sort of rote questioning. But let me throw out, what kind of things over the last couple of years have kept you up at night, and how have you dealt with them as a board chair? Who wants to start? Oh, Carm, you just unmuted yourself. I'll go with you.
Sure. Well, when you say the last few years, right? Unfortunately, you're talking about the lingering effects of COVID. And at least from our perspective at the United Way, traditional giving at the United Way has been declining for 20 years. The way people formally gave to the United Way is just sort of a thing of the past. So we are in transition to a more in tune, modernized way of encouraging people to give, and then COVID comes along and basically throws us, a major league curveball, and essentially escalated that transition away from traditional workplace giving campaigns to all kinds of social media and electronic giving, and really now we find ourselves in a battle with so many other not-for-profits. Everyone wants a share of that almighty dollar. And frankly, we were in the midst of that change, and we're not very far through that change. So it really pushed us to change who we are, how we were positioned in the community, and how we encourage people to give. We laughed about some of our ages. It was news to me that you could, give money just by tapping your phone and doing things like that. But it was a whole basically speeding up of the process. So that still keeps us up at night.
Yeah, that's great. Who wants to go next? Freddie?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think we probably share some similar kind of notions on that front in terms of obviously funding. Things are moving and changing. We're all competing for the same dollar, trying to do the best we can to service our community. That community, in some ways, for some of us, gets bigger, more complicated, and we want to fulfill that need. So I think funding certainly something we're consistently thinking about. Staffing is something we've also have faced in terms of challenges. We have a behavioral health a component of the work we do, and trying to stay competitive in what we offer, what we put on the table with obviously other folks throughout the region, I think has been a little bit of a challenge. And you kind of alluded to this before, but also, managing our building. And it's it's a huge commitment, one that we are committed to as a organization, but it is a big one that we constantly have to make sure we stay on top of. we continue to invest in. And again, not only for us, but for the people who see our building as a safety net in many ways. So, a bit of a challenge, but something we're up for in terms of the task. So I think those three things I think keep me up at night as chair.
Mary Kay?
Well, I could be flippant about the things that keep me up at night and talk about the tangibles, the squirrels in the attic, the water that gets into the basement that creates mold, and architectural elements that are rotting off the building. But the real challenge that we have is moving into the digital age and making our historic archives available to everybody who wants to get on a computer, type in a search relating to Oswego County history, and have it come up immediately from anywhere in the world. We were so far behind the curve because we used to have a large paid staff, which we lost when county funding was withdrawn. And so we've been all volunteer for the last 15 years, and frankly, did not get into the digital age with websites and scanning. COVID was actually good for us. We did not lose funding. Our small community, and we're in a small city, rallied and donations were up. We were closed for 18 months, but our admissions to the House Museum is only about 5% of our income. So we had the time and could spread out, got some grants to buy scanners, and we started to get our collections digitized so that they're searchable. It's an entirely different set of problems than you guys have, but it is emphasized how much we need to get a director back, because I spend all of my time as a volunteer managing this museum, and I can't do it forever. And we can't rely on retirees to always be as, available as I am. So that keeps me up at night. How are we going to be able to afford a director to come in and work for almost no money, because all of our $70,000 budget goes to heat and lights and security, etc.
It is a beautiful building. I can attest to that. Xavier, you have any thoughts?
Sure. I'm not going to say a lot about financials because I think they're on top of everyone's mind. COVID for us was not too bad in a sense that, like many other nonprofits, we benefited from federal aids during COVID, and we could waive a lot of the headwinds that were coming to us, including closing the facility for several months. What has been intriguing for us is durable changes in our students' behavior, which during COVID, what we see continuing is the lack of, I would say, commitment for long or repeated art classes. And we see people really signing up for shorter commitments. So I think that this COVID and this shift in terms of what our community needs are kind of forces us to rethink about our programming and reinvent ourselves in terms of making shorter classes, having workshop, maybe drop-in workshop where people can sign up at the very last minute, which we think is a very durable trend on the art classes category. And I think that has been one thing that continues to keep us busy in terms of fine tuning, or sometimes more than fine tuning. Sometimes it's reinventing our programs. I would just close on the building we own. We're lucky to own two old Victorian buildings. So we're lucky in terms of having these beautiful old ladies, we call them here. At the same time, this is a, I would not say nightmare, but something that is very concerning in terms of how we can sustain these buildings, and a lot of financial planning going on right now to see how we're going to do this in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, thank you. I think that's awesome. So why don't we sort of take that question and move it forward a little bit? If you could reflect on how you as a chair or were working with your board, marshaling them to help address these problems. not only having to do it yourself or having staff do it, but having the board work together to lead you forward in addressing these challenges. Any kind of board relations you want to talk to. Freddie, you just, okay, who wants to go?
Freddie, go. Well,
Okay.
we'll flip for it, Freddie. Go ahead.
Go for it.
No, I was just gonna kind of mention, obviously the chairs board is, I mean, the chair position at the board level obviously has many different responsibilities and ways of I think everyone can do it differently, but I think we all know what needs to be done. I think one of the ways in which we try to tackle all those different issues is by empowering our committees to do the work, right? I think board meetings can be very long, and if we try to tackle it always in large group, I think that can be very difficult. And also making sure as board chair that folks are empowered to share thoughts, speak up, whether at meetings, one-on-ones, via email, that be accessible as much as possible in order to encourage different people at different times to participate in that dialogue and problem solving opportunity. But I would say the most important um, thing that I focused on during my chair is making sure that we empower our committees to do exactly what we want them to do, and come up with solutions that helps the board as a whole make the right decision. And I think that's probably the best way I can explain how we get things done.
Well, let me follow up on that. So in my day job here, I think I mentioned I report to a board, and this is a large organization, much larger than the not-for-profits that I'm involved with, including the United Way. And we have 750 employees and an operating budget of $150 million. So I am the chief governance officer here, constantly working with our board and our board chair on the governance process. And Freddie, that's exactly what we do here. The board itself is more ceremonial. The committees are where all the work is done, right? So you get all your work done in the various committees that feed and funnel information and decision making to the board. Obviously, the board, votes and on procurements or whatever it might be, right? But the committees is where you sort of churn through the various work items. So I've taken a page from what I do here to the not-for-profit world that I also seems like I spent more time in the not-for-profit world than I do here. But using that sort of approach and getting the committees energized and empowered to do the work for the board. Because the board itself at the United Way is 25 people. Sometimes it's just difficult to take attendance. Never mind, getting them to sort of agree on something on the day of the meeting. So if you're coming through the committee and the finance committee has already approved and blessed your budget, that's how the report is made to the board, and the board trusts the committee has done its work, and they may have questions or something of the like. But that's a key point. Now let's empower our committees to do the work for the board, to support the board.
That's amazing. Xavier, Mary Kay, you want to chime in there?
I can. I was going to say the same thing as Freddie before he talked. So I'll repeat a little bit, but empowerment, I mean, creating an environment where all board members can participate and feel safe to call out issues that they may perceive, because the strength of a board is also coming from the diversity of the board, its board members, and the different skill set, the different sensitivity they bring to the table. So we have a lot of discussion these days in terms of making sure that the board is diverse from all aspects of diversity you can think about, but also in terms of skill set, for example, because you don't want a monolithic board, I mean, just focused on financial issues. It's important to bring, I mean, the sensitivity that is relevant to your activity also. I mean, for us, for example, we're going to try to get more people versed in the arts. This is something that is missing, believe it or not, on our board. But the notion to empower the committees is very important. And we have three very important committees that are doing a lot of legwork on the board. I mean, the strategy committee, the financial committee, and the facility committee, because of these two buildings that we own. The facility committee is critical, for example, to assess what is required for maintaining those buildings, but also to develop the plan in terms of how we're going to tackle this over the next years. So I couldn't agree more about this.
And I'm very inspired by your words, because we are in the very first stages of implementing a strategic plan that Barbara helped us create last year. We had gotten a grant, and we discovered, many issues, including the fact that our committees were virtually useless and never met and never made any decisions, or rarely. But it also identified best practices. We had no term limits for our board members. And I would have to complain that our board members, in addition to being kind of elderly, are not drawn from a broad spectrum of the community where they could actually advise us. We don't have a lawyer. We couldn't afford it. It would be nice to have a lawyer on the board, somebody who understands business. I did get somebody who understood facilities and a graphic artist. But we really need a changeover in the board. And I hope any of our audience who also manages or is board for a very small organization understands that in our situation, our board members have to be our staff and bring skills and energy and time to running the programs and managing the museum. And that goes right from giving tours to, talking about an investment or an insurance plan. Thank God for Barbara, because she's actually having us rewrite our bylaws. She pointed out the flaws, and we're going to rewrite them to incorporate term limits for the board members. Now, there are term limits for officers. My term will end in June. I've been on the board for 7 years and president for 6. Right. But we have some really necessary changes to be made, and a lot of that will include turnover of the board.
Yeah, so let's talk a minute about recruitment. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to go back to you really quickly, Mary Kay, because I was struck, and I did not pay her anybody to push my services, but when we did our board retreat, you have strategically recruited a small group of younger people who it seems kind of shaking things up a little bit. Can you talk about the benefits of doing that, or unless I was mistaken in thinking that?
No, the younger people have been very vital. Now, our treasurer is a mother of 2 and works for the federal government and is overwhelmed, but she devotes hours every week to doing our books and making reports that practically nobody else understands, but that's okay. I do. We have a young, we turned him from an employee, contract employee for a grant into a board member, and he is now revamping our website, putting out wonderful newsletters, beautifully professional graphic newsletters. And that is going to make a difference in our donor base. Our museum assistant, even though she's 20 hours a week and minimum wage, she is running the interns and creating programming and just did a calendar. She's inventing events and managing our digital archives and the organization of them. It's way over my head. I couldn't do it. But thank God for her.
That's okay.
Yeah. And other than that, our facilities manager is in his 60s, but still really good. He's retired from the nuclear power plant.
All right. So can I open the floor to these 3 gentlemen? Can you talk a little bit about how your recruiting has gone and, how you have balanced being strategic about it with just wanting to get really great people, if you have?
Earlier, Barbara, part of one of your questions was, as board chair, how did you work with the board to get decisions made, difficult decisions? And we're talking about buildings and the United Way. One of the things that we have done is we moved from the fringes of Albany, almost suburbs, right into the downtown area is now the headquarters. But the interesting part is we also we leased a huge part of the building, and we've turned it into a co-working space for not-for-profits. And any given day, there are 50 different not-for-profits working in the building in some manner, shape, or form. To be honest, the board initially was not in favor of it. Over time, warmed up to it, but because financially it made sense to sell our building and move there, and frankly, it opened up all sorts of avenues for grants and new revenue that we would never have received before. But at the end of the day, there were 4 or 5 board members that were just stuck. They were not going to vote for this, even though quietly they admitted that it was probably the best thing. So that's where the board chair comes in, right? And what does the board chair do? And that maybe the most important aspect of being board chair is getting a large group of people to sort of agree on a direction, even if deep down a couple of them, didn't want to move on that. So that was really my job, and it took 6 months. 6 months of meetings, coffee, arm wrestling, pleading, warming them up. But at the end of the day, it was incredibly important that the vote to move forward with the project was unanimous. I take pride in eventually getting those 5 or 6 people to come over and vote affirmatively. So we needed it to be unanimous. We needed a lot of behind the scenes work, convincing meetings after meetings of the finances. They were very concerned with the finances. So, board chair is at the end of the day, everything but from chief bottle washer to chief executive. So I take pride in finally getting the naysayers to move over.
Congratulations. Freddie, did I see you put your hand up?
Yeah. So on the previous question, and then I'll get into the recruitment part. I think it's also important for chairs to really get to know the people around the boardroom, right? It's the best way to deploy, and tap into people's strengths. And so I think people bring not only professional skills, but personal skills and connections in ways that you probably couldn't even imagine. But it does take time to spend time with folks, get to know them, allow them again to share thoughts, ideas, and things like that. So I think that's extremely important. And on the recruitment side, we've done it strategically in terms of identifying what's missing on our board. And what's missing, we've done surveys in terms of skill set. We cover a fairly large geography, a couple of counties, and so want to make sure that we're representative of all the places where we exist, representative of everyone who our community represents and who we serve, skill sets that are necessary to be successful as a board. And then from that, we've done a really collective effort with not only with our board, but also with our staff about who are some folks that would be great on our board. We're missing a couple of, skill sets. We don't have representation from, this county, et cetera. And then we get a large list of wonderful people. And then we try to figure out, again, what do we need at this moment? Who can we have conversation with? Who we have relationships with? Who we don't have relationship with? And how can we engage them for future seats? So we've done it in a very systematic, strategic, but intentional and inclusive way, which I think is, sometimes hard because it does take time. It's not something that you can do overnight, but I think it is necessary, especially when we are, because we are service to the community. I think that always has to be front and center in the decisions that we make as a nonprofit organization.
Just a little follow-up, because I think I heard you say, and I hope you did, you didn't necessarily have people on your board who knew the people that you were interested in reaching out to, right? You had to get creative around that as well.
Absolutely. We wanted to expand our reach, right? It's easy to say, hey, if you know someone, bring them in. But if if I'm, if I'm in accounting, most likely the person I would recommend is in accounting or something similar. And your circles are fairly the same in many ways, whether we talk about race, age, whether we talk about, skill sets, where you live, geography, right? And so we wanted to expand that a little bit. And it helped. It helped tremendously. And it's an intentional act that needs to happen in order for you to get there. It doesn't happen, I think, by mistake. It can, but I think that's where boards and board chairs can be more impactful in making sure that the board represents the community in the best way it can.
Thank you. Xavier, you want to chime in here? Whoops.
Yeah, yeah. So what did you say regarding board recruitment? You have to be very deliberate and strategic. I agree. To the point where we have actually a committee dedicated to this. Call it the board development committee. And I've seen this committee working in the last, I would say, 5 years, really moving the needle in terms of getting into a place where we have, for example, a very strong pipeline. Our terms are limited to 3 consecutive terms of 3 years each, so 9 years. And this committee figured out a way to make sure that we're not having a large group of people with critical skills, rolling out in a given year. So they have been very deliberate in terms of recruiting and making sure that there is a very smooth transition between board members, very strong pipeline also by recruiting future board members as committee members. So we have also strong engagement of volunteers on the various committees as a way also to identify the people that are, I would say, compatible with the board from a skill set, from a values perspective. I think it's important that we also recruit people that are compatible with the organization in terms of being aligned with the mission of the organization, as well as sometimes the values that we're displaying, maybe often the values we're displaying every single day. So I think that's very important. The thing I would add is we had as a board to recruit a new executive director for the art center last year. And this is not a small task. It took us, I think, 9 months beginning to end. And it was like recruiting a professional in the private sector because we went outside, posted a job, had multiple interviews, and this is a lot of additional hours. For board members and committee members.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so let's follow up on that a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about succession planning. Have you engaged in that with your boards? Do you have a plan? Is it more ad hoc? I know both for board members, and then I know two of you have also recruited new CEOs. Who wants to take that? Freddie, you're nodding your head.
No, so yeah, succession I think is critical. We obviously have term limits. Folks can be on the board for a little while, which is good, but I think, people's careers and things kind of take hold. So in terms of the board and the board chair position, as an example, we have a structure where, our first, vice chair will move into board chair, and vice versa, right? So things kind of shift. And I think it's a great way to prepare people. So when I was chair, I spent a lot of time with our vice chairs to make sure that they understand the intricacies of all the things that we're covering. I invite them to the meetings that I attend to as well. I think the way we position our successors is extremely important for the organization. So I think making sure that you have some type of succession embedded into your board, I think is probably, for me, best practice. And it may just be the vice chair role. So I don't think it has to be secretary to treasurer, treasurer to vice chair, right? But I think as you think about the next chair, I think that should certainly be in place. We also had a CEO transition where our CEO retired, and we had in their contract the stipulation to let us know if possible, obviously, 12 months in advance. And so we got the time to really flesh this out. That 12 months goes really fast, by the way. And so don't wait. So we went through that entire process. We fortunate enough to hire from within. Our chief program officer became our CEO. And so we're lucky in that sense that our current CEO was also thinking about transition and, preparedness and things like that. And so was able to really mentor and engage with the number two. So I think that all those things are extremely important as you think about the board. You could be doing great today, and if someone wins $1 million and disappears, then you're gonna have to go to the drawing board unless you're intentional about grooming, uplifting, encouraging, engaging those people around you, so that if you do hit the lottery, people can step up as much as they can.
Barbara, what Freddie is pointing out is almost what we started with. I thought we were going to dive a little into bylaws and operating procedures. And
Go
we
for
are
it, Carm.
actually
I love bylaws.
we are in there right now because a lot of boards are fearful of these kinds of discussions, operating procedures, bylaws. It's boring. It's no one wants to do it. But if you think about it, without an organized structure and a process, you really can't do any of the things that we're talking about. So succession really bears itself out in how the board has set itself up to succeed. So I would urge people to spend time looking at bylaws, spend time looking at operating procedures, make sure they're up to date, make sure they reflect the current status of the organization and the board, because you're going to have to use those. And to just put them off or push them aside, I think is really short-sighted. And really it makes for a stronger board if you keep these, whatever you call them, up to date.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so Mary Kay, you're just thinking about redoing your bylaws, right? How's that going to be helpful to you?
Well, we are not in compliance now. I mean, best practices say we have term limits for board members. We're going to put that in, but we do not have anything in there about holding digital meetings, which are required now in New York State. I think it will help us generate this turnover on the board that's necessary, and clarify the rest of our policies.
That's great. That's really great. Yes, Freddie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I also think it is extremely important to think about, the limitations to service. Like what, what are the things that are keeping people from wanting to be on our board or being on our board? Whether it's, maybe people are unclear of who you are and what you do. Maybe they are unclear about, term and how much time you will need to put in. Maybe I'm unclear on who how does this process start or end. And so I think sometimes it's looking really close at your organization and asking the question, why would someone want to be on our board? Why wouldn't someone want to be on our board? And try to be as honest as you possibly can. Because I think, I've had the privilege of serving on different nonprofits, small, big. And I think sometimes we when we're in it, we think everything's great, and maybe someone might be looking at it a little different than us. And so asking those questions, being honest about answering those questions, I think is an important step to try to find new people, find folks who, may not ever even considered being on our board, but have tremendous talent and time to do so.
That's great.
If people don't feel good about serving, they're not going to serve. So you know that's a sort of a basic human need, you know, to feel good about what we do. So that board experience has to be constructed so that people feel good about what they're doing. You know, sometimes just coming to meetings is, you know, that's really not all that exciting. So you have to find a way to keep people engaged and excited about what they're doing.
I think
And
that's
that
If
requires,
it becomes a chore, I want out.
yeah. Mary Kay, you were about to say.
well, it requires so much work on your part to train them, educate them, explain to them what your mission is and actually what you do and get them excited about at least one portion of it that they can take ownership of. And and definitely the whole as a whole. But yeah, they've got to really catch fire on some task where they can make a difference.
Great.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Really great point. Anybody looking to recruit should have your 2-minute elevator speech. Why would someone want to join our board? Right? Parenthetically, I'm taking my board. We're all meeting for drinks on my board tomorrow because we're usually virtual. So moving right along, I'm going to do one more topic and then we'll open it up for questions. So why don't you chat a little bit about the relationship with the executive director and also how you make sure that you're not getting too much in the weeds around the day-to-day operations of your board, et cetera, but really creating room for strategy and visioning. Who wants to take it? Buddy, go for it.
Or Xavier, I know, I saw Xavier. I'll let him chime in. I've been talking.
No, that's okay. No worries. Yeah, I had some recent experience about this this issue of governance that you were alluding to. As we were changing our executive director, I found out that their needs were different in terms of how they wanted to engage with the board. And it has been a journey for the board to actually adjust and find, I mean, the right mode of operation and partnership with this new executive director and their staff. I would say that there are times, especially on relatively small board and organization, and we are kind of in between board of 18, an organization with 5, 6 permanent staff members, 70 temporary teachers for classes. We still have board members acting as volunteers from time to time. And I think that's the big watch out, in a sense, is for board members to understand what kind of hat they wear when they step in the organization. Are they volunteer? Are they a student? Are they a board member? Or are they just visiting because we're having exhibits? And I think we had a blurred situation in the past where some people were kind of acting and getting into the weeds because of being a volunteer at times and being directive all of a sudden to staff members because they were also board members. And this blurry situation was not healthy for the organization, was pointed out very early on by the new executive director. So we partner in terms of bringing that governance question on the table, having discussion with all board members. As the chair of the board, me calling out several people on the side and saying, I think you're crossing the line here. Our job is not, for example, to get into programming and the program definition, but more about defining high-level directions from a strategic perspective, of course, exercising our fiduciary duties, but letting the staff and the organization act and be fully have full ownership of the tactical issues. So very important one. And I think the only advice I would have is be aware that board members may have different hats. And I think Mary came in your one of this example where your board members are probably at the very end of the spectrum, of one end of the spectrum. but be aware of it and have, very open discussion about it.
So that blur that you identified is a make or break blur for the executive director, the chief executive officer. Again, I think you have to have something in writing that talks about this, so that when you're doing your orientation of board members, the first thing you can talk about is this type of thing. Here's what we expect from you. Here's what we don't expect from you. And here are areas that you have to be respectful of the chief executive officer. Here in my organization, it's day one, we tell board members, you're not involved in the operating segment of the business. And frankly, if you do contact a staff member, the staff member will let the chief executive officer know that board member X, Y, or Z contacted me and wants information about whatever it might have. That may sound like over governance, but I don't think it is. I think at the end of the day, that chief executive chair relationship is critical to the success of the organization. I think if we treat it with a little bit more respect, good things follow.
I think that's a fair point, Con. I think that it's a little bit of a balance. You have a treasurer who has a relationship with the CFO. If you have a fundraising arm, everybody has a relationship with the development director. So those lines can get blurry around that kind of thing pretty quickly. And it's good to be mindful. And I think, I don't know if anybody here is going to say it, but I will. Sometimes you do have to have a tough conversation. We have a bunch of questions in the chat Q&A, like how do we do this without offending people? How do we kick people off how do we gently move people off the board? How do we tell people that they're not doing the right thing without offending them? And the answer is, I think you can't. At some point, as the board chair, you might be called upon to have a tough conversation, right? Anybody?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not, that's part of the role.
Do it early. Yeah. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but the old thumpers rule, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated, and you're kind, you're polite, you're professional. But the sooner you have that conversation, the better off you are. If it lingers and it continues, boy, oh boy, it gets tough real quick. Know that before you take the board chair position too.
I think that's a fair point. All right, shall we open it up? It's about 10 minutes before the end. Shall we open it up to a few questions from the audience? Okay, we've talked a little bit about succession. There is a question about how do you help keep your board members from burning out? You ask a lot of them. You've all been through the CEO transition, the building, that these are heavy things. Ready?
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I think, it certainly starts depending, again, how big your organization is, what you cover. I think it starts with size, making sure you're the right size, making sure that you have the right, folks, around the table as best as you can. I think also, in some ways, I think how we appoint people to committee chairs and who gets involved with what aspect of the board, I think is important. I've been part of organizations that tend to appoint the same person for the same committee role, and not thinking about, again, that person's maybe maybe interest in something else or opportunity to grow in a different department. And so I think there are ways to rotate people. I also think this is where the expertise and the diversity of your board is important, so that then you can do that in a way that's effective, right? Everyone wants to put, the financial CPA on finance every time. And I think there's legitimate reasons, but maybe that person wants to join this board because they love what you do in the programs and maybe wants to participate in programs. So I think it's easy to burn out when you're doing things maybe that you also do at work, So I think having those conversations about what else you may want to do or get involved with, and then obviously checking in. Oftentimes you on a board and you go 2-3 years and never had a conversation with anyone about how happy or how engaged you are or want to be. Maybe you want to dial down, but you just have never had the opportunity to share that. So having one-on-one conversations to measure that and address it, I think, is also important.
It's really important.
And just because a person's a CPA doesn't mean they want to chair the finance committee. They do that all day long, and now they come to the meeting at 5 o'clock and they're chairing the finance committee. maybe they want to be in charge of the program committee.
Right.
I think that's a fair point. All right. Oh, we have any more questions? Let's talk about Freddie, we have a question, and I this directed to you, and I think it would be interesting for the people on the call to hear. When you talked about identifying people and reaching out to them when your board members didn't already know them, what was the process that you used to do that? And how long did it take you to sort of identifying to like finding a new board member?
The time frame is and it's done through our governance committee, and so the time frame for me is a little blur. I'm gonna say it's a few months of work, and so the way we initiate the contact is by just being transparent. Hey, we are in the process of identifying board members for our board, and your name has surfaced as a recommendation. We love to get to know you and see if there's any opportunities to, and we give them the option: get on a committee, or serve on our board. And that way, again, if it's not the right time, if it's not a right match, we still will try to find a way to engage that individual in some capacity. And so, I think I often say, like, we also have, so many events throughout the year. How nice it would be to invite folks who were on that list to your events for free. Come and see who we are and what we do. And I think, at least for us, folks come to an event and they say, "Wow, I didn't know you did all of that," or, "I didn't know you were tackling these issues." We have our clients, a client present that at an event or talk about their experience with us, and those things I think are what connect people. So we try to just, take it kind of slice by slice. So there are obviously needs that we've identified for our board that will take priority. There are secondary needs that people that we definitely want to engage in some capacity. Maybe it's not the right time for us or for them, but maybe a committee involvement might work. And the third is making connection. And this goes back not only to board recruitment, but it goes back to fundraising or friend raising, however you define that, making connections in community. So we're hitting 3 buckets of different people in any given time, which I think helps the organization in many different ways. So that's how we go about it. That timeline can be 2 months, can be 6 months, depending on where you are in that process.
One other thing that we do here at the United Way and other organizations that I'm involved with is it's company based. So if you have a law firm, a bank, a health insurance company that has a board member and their term is coming to an end, the first thing I do is who do you have behind you? Who else in your organization might be willing to serve? And oftentimes those seats become sort of like company seats, right? And you just keep bringing in new members from that company. So think about that too. If you have that ability to have an appointee from a bank or a law firm or whatever it might be, you might find yourself in a position to have a board member for a long, long time.
That's actually a good point. I'm starting to do training for branch managers of M&T Bank on, what does it mean to be on a nonprofit board?
Yep.
So if you bank with M&T folks and you don't have a board member from the bank, think about talking to them about that. I think that's absolutely a fair point. Thank you. Okay. All right. So I think one last question. Dealing with board members who aren't stepping up, who aren't doing their job, who don't show up, who may have only joined your board because it looks good on their resume. How do you do that? How long do you wait to figure out that's happening? Uh-oh, Carm, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, well, I mean, that goes back to what we talked about earlier. It should be in your bylaws or your operating procedures that board members are expected to attend, not every meeting, but you put it right in there. They're expected to attend 80% of the meetings or something of the sort. So if they don't do that, that's sort of check number one. That's conversation number one. You're not necessarily going to toss them off the board if they didn't hit the number, but it's an easy way to have a conversation. Hey, our bylaws say that you have to be at 80% of the meetings. I know it was a tough year for you, but can you step up next year? It gives you sort of the ready-made door opener. It's a lot easier if you have stuff written down.
And that's really a board chair responsibility, not the CEO or executive director responsibility.
That initial discussion has to be very clear on the expectations of a board member. And I would venture to say throughout the year at your board meetings, I would just a reminder.
Yep.
You got to come to our meetings. You got to read the stuff before you, and so that everybody, it's not, one, I told Xavier one thing and he interpreted it a different way. And right, everyone is hearing the same message on an ongoing basis. I think that's extremely important as well.
It sounds harsh, but it's not.
It's not. That's right. All right. We have like 2 minutes left. I want to open it up. Do any of you have any final thoughts, things we didn't get to that you think it's important for people to know about being a board chair?
For a wide area.
We hit everything.
Clearly understand expectations. I think I got into that position without understanding what it meant. Retrospectively, I'm glad that I said yes at that time. I mean, that's been a ride for me, but has been also a fantastic experience in terms of growing my skills. I mean, as a board member in that position. But I had no clue about what it meant exactly when I said yes.
Yeah, I think that's a great conclusion. It's expectations. Make sure people know what's expected of them. So often you're so interested in getting a specific person on your board or in a position or in your chair or as whatever that you soft pedal. You don't tell them about the time requirement. You're not completely upfront about the financial requirement. You're not 100% forthcoming about the challenges that the organization faces. And that's not a great position to be in when the person that you've recruited is surprised by what's actually expected of them. So that's great. All right. Well, I would like to thank all 4 of our panelists. We're right at 1 o'clock for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate everybody who joined us today. Our next panel will be on April 9th. We'll be discussing board diversity. Freddie will be back with us as a representative of a program he runs to encourage younger people to join boards. And you all have my contact information if you have follow-up questions. And you'll be getting a copy of this recording in the next few days. So again, to our panelists, to our audience, thank you so much for making this such a great presentation. And everybody stay warm and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.